Today's session is called Keepers of the Thermostat, How Farmers and Ranchers Can Be Climate Heroes. And I literally mean all of that, literally climate heroes and keepers of the thermostat, meaning the temperature of the earth. And that word is chosen intentionally because there is a technical paper, and the title is basically How Soil Carbon Dioxide is a Global Thermostat. So in fact, that word thermostat is already in the technical literature in regards to soil carbon and in regards to agricultural processes. So that's not just hyperbole. That word and that concept is already part of the literature. I'm wearing today the Maasai necklace, and I'm holding the Maasai club, but I refer to it as my talking stick, in honor and solidarity with the Maasai community in Kenya and Tanzania that Soil for Climate supports. First, I'm the co-founder and co-director of an organization called Soil for Climate, and you'll see some people wearing Soil for Climate hats. There are more available. And so anyway, we've got about 30,500 members in our Facebook group. Feel free to join. Now, first thing I want you to do is I want you to all join me in saying Yebo. Okay? Now, let me explain to you what it means first so you don't think you're being indoctrinated. Yebo, literally, it's a Zulu term. It's very popular in South Africa. It technically means, yes, that's right. But I've been using it in our movement, so to speak, to mean, yes, that's right, soil is a climate solution, and grazing is a way to build soil. It means all of that, okay? Join me in saying Yebo. Yebo! All right, thank you very much. We're officially started now. So I have a lot of slides, so we're just going to go through them like lightning fast. Consider this like entertainment. And then we'll take questions and stuff at the end. Basically, I just want to start with this picture. I like to start with it, the picture of the Earth. It's obviously become sort of a theme picture of the environmental movement. This picture was taken in 1972. So do you realize how old this picture is now? I mean, a lot of people in the audience today, you were born after this picture was taken. You know, you're sort of the generation of this ethic, if you will. And now there's another picture I want to share with you, which is this one. Okay? How many people have seen this picture before? Raise your hand if you've seen. Oh, awesome. That's very cool. I hope the camera guy captures that. This picture was taken by Sam Kroon and the Kroon family ranch in the Karoo region of South Africa. Okay? And I have been to this spot. I've met with Sam Kroon. It's my belief and hope that this is going to become the next sort of thematic environmental picture, you know, of the next 40 or 50 years. You know, kind of like the way, kind of like the way that one was. But now this is my sort of hope and belief that this picture will be the next sort of main picture that people think about when they think about the regeneration revolution that's coming. And there are so many takeaways from this picture. I call it the paradigm fence, because it's a separation not just of two different grazing methodologies. It's a too simplistic, even too pedestrian way of putting it. There's a paradigm of a difference there. And the people in this audience get it. But most of the world is still on the right side of that picture in terms of their paradigm. Most of the world will tell you that the right side got that way from overgrazing. But everyone in this audience knows it's like, no, that's a result of undergrazing. There aren't enough animals on the right side of the picture. When I tell people that the left side of the picture has 4 to 5 times the animal density, and that's why it's restored, they're like, oh. And it's that aha moment, okay? And so that's the beauty of this. Sometimes I'll say, which side gets more rain? Which side is suffering from drought? Which side has more soil carbon? Which side is the climate solution? Which side has more animals? Which side is practicing the savory method? You know, we could just have the whole talk just with that slide. So anyway, I have many more, but if it ended now, it would be enough. Now what most people haven't seen is the Google Earth projection of that same spot. There you go. So there's the Google Earth projection of that same spot. You can see the efficacy of regenerative grazing from space, which gets us back to our Earth photo. And so when people say, oh, it doesn't work, and, you know, it's hokum, I'm like, hello? Well, I guess Google Earth Pro didn't get the memo that this doesn't work. It obviously works. It's been working for 50 years. The evidence of it is visible from satellite. So we really need to be promoting this. And if you can tell, I'm emphatic about this. That's what I am. I'm an activist for regenerative grazing to build soil to mitigate global warming. All three of those things together. And so there you go. It's Earth consciousness and the regenerative future. There's sort of your takeaway image from a paradigm point of view. Okay, so obviously the methodology is by using livestock as a proxy for wild herds. You all will be familiar with this concept. Most people today, certainly even most environmentalists, have no idea what the animal density used to be like. And I have a lot of slides here. I'll just kind of go through them quickly. So here's a picture I took. Here's a mixed species herd in Zimbabwe at the Africa Center for Holistic Management. They're practicing, you know, holistic planned grazing. This is my colleague, Dalmas Tiampati, Maasai herder in Kenya. He's the one who gave me these things, by the way. Hi, Dalmas. And then the Soil for Climate, the organization that I'm with, sponsored his training in holistic planned grazing, and then we also helped with basic needs like buying a bull, some cows, you know, some infrastructure stuff. So here he is doing herd grazing, you know, doing a densely packed grazing. This is sorry, I'm spacing on where this is right now, but it's East African country. Again, similar methods. And then, oh, what I love this. Okay, this is Will Harris. This is white oak pastures in Georgia, United States, eastern United States. And what I love about this picture is you see they're in the forest. So this is a classic silvopasture situation. And the anti-livestock crowd always says, oh, grazing requires cutting down trees. No, 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 it's just the opposite, okay? Will planted these trees. He's created the harvest. He grazes right through the forest. He grazes right through the forest. And then, you know, you can see the kind of densities. And when you get densities like that, you start to get herd behavior. You start to get galloping. You know, how often do you see cows galloping? And the herd behavior is part of the restoration. It's not just a density, it's literally their type of behavior. This is another one in Zimbabwe. Just the notion of this guy just sort of walking along and they're just sort of quietly sort of walking with him. It's just sort of a beautiful concept. Here's an example of restoration. This is a part of South Africa called Laboa. Again, paradigm fence situation. Okay, we call this the elbow spot just because that tree branch there looks like an elbow. You'll see some classic sort of before and after pictures. This is in Zimbabwe now. There's your before. That's Alan Savory in an after. And then I do what I call these future scope collages where, you know, I paint a bit of the modern image on the old one. And you can think of it like a telescope, right? But it's sort of a future scope, like you're looking at a desert area, and you can see in your mind's eye what it would look like when it's restored. So then that's how it looked in 2014. Here's another spot. They call this the two-tree spot, just because there's sort of two trees next to each other. Similar sort of before and after pictures. That's me. And then what I like to say is, don't tell me this doesn't work. I've stood in the efficacy. Standing in the efficacy. And just some more of just a kind of, oh, is that redundant? Okay. So I just need to go through these quickly. But what you see here, I'm going to, oh, I can, hold on. So the plant is called Panica maximum. It's called a high succession plant. It can only live in the best conditions. And you can see the tiny little seed heads here. Here's the mycelial modules. Here's the millipedes and the fungus. I don't know if you can see that there. So obviously very healthy soil, holding moisture, sequestering carbon. Okay, so this is infrared satellite data mapped to the Google Earth perimeter files. This is all open source data you can download. The image in the middle. The property on the bottom is the Africa Center for Holistic Management, the sort of the Savory Institute property. The property on the top is the Victoria Falls National Park. And you always see these videos of Alan. He says, national parks 20 miles from here are just complete desert. This is what he's referring to. He's referring to the Victoria Falls National Park. All the pictures you're about to see were taken by me on the same day. So the bottom set are the ones taken on Alan's property, and then the top set are the ones taken at the Victoria Falls National Park. This is the best of ecological management that Western science can provide in a dryland area. Look at this. You can see well, first of all, there's no grass at all, right? It's completely bare and just erosion. And then this is Alan's property. And it's about 20 kilometers separate between the two. And of course, the national park doesn't allow grazing, doesn't allow hunting. Here's Alan's property. They have grazing and hunting, and it's managed holistically. Okay, similar situation. This is Gabe Brown in North Dakota. Guess which side of the road his property is on. His neighbor is in rapeseed. Gabe is doing grazing, but he grows soy as a cover crop in rotation with grazing. It's part of his holistic context. He's obviously paid well for it. There's Gabe in his truck looking at his neighbor's property in some, sadness. Okay, this should work.
So when my wife and I purchased this farm from her parents in 1991, soil organic matter levels on the cropland were 1.7 to 1.9%. And now the studies and samples we're taking show that our organic matter levels vary from 5.3 to 7.9% on that same land base. So we've been able to significantly cycle carbon and put more back into the cycle, into the soil. And I really believe soil carbon is a cycle, and it cycles much more readily than we think. The issue now is we have way too much in the atmosphere and not enough cycled into the soil where it can feed biology.
I forgot that I put Yabo at the end of that video. Okay, so you get the point. I got lots of slides here, so we'll just move through them. Does anyone remember the Clint Eastwood movie, A Fistful of Dollars? So I decided to call it A Fistful of Mitigation on my meme here, but it actually occurred to me afterwards, it will be a fistful of dollars, right? When the soil carbon economy, which is coming, and I don't believe there's necessarily going to be a one-to-one relationship between soil carbon and dollars. There'll be other factors as well. But nonetheless, that is literally money in your hand. When you have high soil organic matter, that's the bank of the future. Okay, so anyway, let's just go on. Oh, boy. All right, so these are sort of some more examples of restoration and also sort of paradigm if you will, okay? I'm sure people recognize this. This was the Jeff Bezos Blue Horizon launch that had William Shatner of Star Trek, right? So William Shatner is in that little module there somewhere, right? You guys all remember this? It was a big event a few months ago. So what's the message? The message is this is the future, right? Space tourism, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, okay? There's the module when it landed. What do you see in this picture? Go ahead, just yell out. Bare soil. Desert. Exactly. Okay. That's, for me, this remember the future periscope thing? I was just horrified. Horrified. I watched this thing. You know, I take a lot of CBD. And I need it, and that's why. Okay, this picture was taken 20 miles away, same week, by Bob Kinford, a regenerative grazer, also in Texas, literally 20 miles away. Okay, now, here they are in Google Earth. There's the Jeff Bezos launch area. Here's where Bob Kinford is doing regenerative grazing. Same time of year, same ecosystem, same rain, same everything. What's different? The management. Bezos is using, let's just call it regenerative grazing. He has his own spin on the savory method. He calls it instinctive migratory grazing. There's the contrails. There's the contrails, which Bob Kinford took this picture from his horse. He's on a horse with cattle taking a picture of the contrails of the Jeff Bezos Blue Horizon. You see the profound irony in these situations, right? Okay, and so this is some of the area that he's restoring. They used to have the circular irrigation thing. I don't know if they ran out of water or whatever, but they're not doing it anymore. So the whole area is just turning into sagebrush, but now he's bringing back grass, starting with bunch grass. Eventually, it will become like a turf, like a sod grass, even in Texas. Okay, so there's Bob Kinford on his horse doing his thing, and there's the. So no, really, which one is the futurist? Which one do you trust your future to? You know, the wealthiest man in the world, who's sending phallic-shaped rockets into space in the desert, or some guy on a horseback who's just quietly bringing greenery back to the desert? Which do you have faith in? All right. Okay. Alejandro Correro. People know about him. He's in North Mexico. So him and Bob Kinford are friends. They literally live on just other sides of the border there. Okay, right. So this is Alejandro's. This was Alejandro's property. And then this is after the restoration. So I've got a lot of sort of pictures that are sort of examples of this. Same property, same rainfall, same everything, different livestock management. Okay, now which side has more water? So this is an interesting question because you can see the water here, right? You don't see it here, but which side has more water? All right, you're a smart crowd. You know where I'm going with this. This was just a catch dam, right? This was a 1-inch rain. He said he can get a 6-inch rain now and not have standing water in the depression. So in theory, there could be 6 times more water in this picture than in that one. Okay, Alejandro also took this picture recently. If you don't follow Alejandro on Facebook, definitely you want to follow him. This is back to white oak pastures. This is in Georgia now. Everyone is growing peanuts, corn, or cotton. That's it, the whole state. Peanuts, corn, and cotton or you're grazing. I mean, it's unimaginable. It looks like Mars. This is just a typical scene in Georgia now. And of course, when it rains, you know what happens to the water? It just becomes red. And so this is a project we're working on in Kenya. We call it Enkup Osaligi, which is the Maasai word for promised land. It's interesting, the evolution of this term, because when I was trying to come up with a name for it, just sort of a placeholder name, I said, well, let's call it Hectares of Hope. And I knew it was corny. I wasn't expecting that would be the name we would go forward with. I just wanted like a placeholder name. So I said, let's call it Hectares of Hope. And my colleague Dalmas went, oh, no, we could never do that. And I'm like, well, I know it's not a great name, but I wasn't expecting like a visceral reaction. He said, oh, no, we could never do that. And I said, he said, oh, the Maasai can't use the word hectare. I was like, oh. And why is that? He said, well, that's a colonial term. It's like, oh, okay. See, now it's beginning to sink in. And I said, well, what do you call it? He says, well, we call it land. It's like, oh, you see, you get these unexpected sort of learning moments. And a lot of it has to do with language, right? I'm getting a nod here. Thank you. And I said, well, what's the word for like hopeful land or whatever? And so this is the Maasai. And literally in the Maasai version of the Christian Bible, that is the term, Enkup Osaligi, which means promised land. And so that was the training at the Mara Training Center, which was a savory hub in West Kenya. And then we went to the community and did some training there. You've probably seen this picture before of the cow eating the high part of the grass down to here. The roots die back. That cycle, that's what's going on there in that diagram. And so Dalmas's organization is called the Maasai Center for Regenerative Pastoralism. We're Soil for Climate, so it's a combination of the two. And then we help them buy animals, buy a bull, set up a nice new corral. You do need, doing mobile corrals is very challenging, as I'm sure you know. There's all sorts of issues with predation and whatever. They weren't ready for that yet. So they just needed a better, newer corral. But they'll get there. They'll be doing mobile corrals eventually. Again, this was just an earth dam, just like the other one I showed you before, just a rainwater catch. It's just it's understood that these are just temporary solutions. It takes time to get the whole regenerative operation going. And then the multi-paddock, and then there's Dalmas again with the animals. Oh, good Lord. Weed mitigation, morning glory. Does anyone know about this problem in East Africa? It's everywhere now. What do you think is the official recommendation on how to deal with morning glory from the Ministry of Agriculture? Glyphosate. Burning wasn't one of them. Okay, glyphosate and hose. Literally chopping it with a hoe and then taking glyphosate on like a paintbrush and painting the exposed stem with glyphosate. That's the official recommendation. Now, this is now a gender issue because that's considered gardening, and that's women's work. Men don't do that. Men are with the cows. And there's a video on state TV, or on one of the main networks in Kenya, of them interviewing a wealthy landowner. And he just says, matter of factly, he says, I hired the women. Just without a second's thought, I hired the women. So now you have women out there with hoes, chopping it and painting it with glyphosate. No protection or whatever. That's how the Western world is dealing with this problem, which is obviously just a result of land degradation. The proper way to mitigate the weed problem there is with regenerative grazing. Okay? So it's so obvious and profound, just the reality when you see it, when you're eyeball to eyeball with it. Yeah, classic the reductionist answer to a reductionist problem. and then people saying, oh, there's too many cows. And then just the Maasai lands, the total area called Maasai lands, which sort of goes between Kenya and Tanzania, is actually sort of equivalent to the area of Iowa in the United States. And that's profound because Iowa is the most important agricultural state in the United States for a whole bunch of reasons. But many of them are also political. And we'll get back to that. So grasslands are the largest carbon sink, and they love to soak up carbon. Okay, so now we're getting into that. This was the slide that Alan Saver used during his TED Talk, just to show the vast area of the world which is or was a grassland. It's now a desert or a semi-desert. And then here's your sort of classic soil carbon cycle type slide. What you want to understand from this one is the soil carbon where it says 2300. That's 2,300 billion tons or 23 gigatons of carbon in the soils in the world. Now you see 5500 in plant biomass. So, almost 4 times as much carbon in soil than in plant biomass, and then in the atmosphere about 800. So soil is by far the largest carbon reservoir on Earth. Now, there is the, okay, well, I got cut off on this slide. There is what's called the fossil carbon, which is all the coal and oil from ancient, biology. We're not counting that. Other than that, soil is by far the largest reservoir of carbon, certainly 3 times as much as is in the atmosphere itself. And then you can literally see it. I mean, that's why soil is dark. I mean, that's why. It's because of the carbon. And this was from an exhibit called Exposed: A Secret Life of Roots, conducted by the U.S. Botanical Society. And so these are the roots of real tall grass prairie plants. And you could see they're even folded at the bottom. Otherwise, it'd be way up here. And then this is just a cross-sectional picture, obviously. But these are real roots. And if this exhibit were to be redone, they should have the animals up here. And they should give more of the whole sort of ecosystem of it. So now we're really, in many ways, all that was like an introduction. There's no way I'll get through all my slides, which is always my problem. But anyway, so now we're getting to the science. Global cooling by grassland soils of the geologic past and near future. How about that, huh? How about that for a title? Near future. I love this guy. His name is Gregory Ritalik, professor of geology at the University of Oregon in the United States. He's really just a superhero. And he's talking about the 50 million year evolution of soils and ruminants, ungulates, other large herbivore megafauna on the plains. This is basically close to a 15 million year story. What we call soil is actually sort of a new thing in terms of biological history, in the sense of sort of grassland soil or agricultural soil. And you can see it's forming with the evolution of the herbivores, and particularly the ruminants. The ruminant is the principal herbivore in terms of producing a carbon-rich sod grasslands. All the herbivores, of course, are part of it. And horses and zebra are sort of an interesting, they're not technically ruminants, but they have a very large stomach which sort of acts like a rumen. So that's the biological history, evolution of grasslands. And of course, what's happening is that it's sequestering carbon. It's literally cooling the planet over geological time spans. And the type of soil that's created with this type of modern from a biological point of view, the grasslands with the large herbivores, it's called a mollisol. Mala, it literally just means soft. It means soft soil. And it's the most recent type of soil, and it's the largest carbon reservoir in soil. And it's where all the Great Plains were. So East Africa, middle of the United States, the Ukraine, right, the breadbasket. The soils there are called mollisols that evolved with these large grazing ruminants. And what you want to see in this picture is that there's Iowa. But by some estimates, Iowa was 100% tallgrass prairie, 100%. Today, there's like less than 1% native prairie less, or even 0.1%. And then here's North Dakota, which is where Gabe Brown is. And there's so many points I want to make. Just don't have time. But basically, Iowa, there's sort of a saying, as goes Iowa, so goes the rest of America, or even so goes the world. Because all of the agricultural politics in the United States and a lot of the world come out of Iowa. So the head of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, is the former governor of Iowa. And he was the head of the Department of Agriculture under the previous president as well. It's just sort of understood. You just give that job to whoever the governor of Iowa was. And their official recommendation, so last time I was in the UK, I was up at Glasgow in November for the climate conference. The official U.S. recommendation out of the Department of Agriculture for how to deal with cows and methane is to give them seaweed. That's at the highest level of international climate agriculture politics. That's what's coming out of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is run by the former governor of Iowa. Give cows seaweed. And then here's Gabe Brown right here in North Dakota, just quietly doing his thing, restoring soil with grazing. And, oh, look at that. Gabe loves Soil for Climate. Who put that slide in there? Okay, just so you know, 2 weeks after the last climate conference, so 2 weeks after Vilsack and the Department of State and the USDA put out a statement saying that the way to deal with cows was to give them seaweed, Gabe Brown won the Heinz Environmental Award. Okay, the Heinz, Heinze, like, Heinz ketchup. So the administrator of that award is Teresa Heinz. Her husband is John Kerry, the U.S. climate envoy and the former Secretary of State. Okay? So her organization, with a quote from her, is lauding Gabe Brown for using grazing to restore soil and to stop using fertilizers and pesticides. So on one hand, you have complete insanity, and then on the other hand, you have total sanity. And it's all just this mixed message, which we're all sort of getting. And so anyway, there's hope. That's sort of my takeaway here, is that there's some hope. Okay, so now here's the evolution of the mollisol grassland soil over geologic time. Let me explain what's going on this slide here, and I'll show you a close-up from Oregon. Okay, this is millions of years ago. So the further down you go, the further back in time you're going, okay? That's pretty straightforward. But this is milliliters of rain, okay? So we're going from 200 to 800. This is the mollisol grassland, the carbon-rich grassland that's made possible with the grazing, large grazing animals, and particularly the ruminants. So what you're seeing is about 20 million years ago, that type of ecosystem shows up. And it shows up in an area that had been dominated by a desert shrubland. And then it moves into, the bunch grass and grassy woodland areas. So the rain hasn't changed, still getting the same amount of rain, but a new type of ecosystem, much more productive, is showing up in this, under this rain load. And then about 7 million years ago, it profoundly expands into wetter areas. Do you see that, what's going on in this slide? This is an important takeaway. The mollisol, the turf grassland, the sod grassland, showed up on Earth about 20 million years ago. And then about 7 million years ago, it vastly expanded its range into wetter areas. There were two profound things that happened. One, the evolution of pack hunting in dogs. Pack hunting changed the behavior of the herbivores, and this is the beginning of herds. There literally didn't used to be herds before. And all the fossil evidence is clear about that. There were scattered family groups. But the whole notion of a herd is the result of the predator behavior. And when you have a herd and when you have predators, a different type of grazing happens. Here's a term you hear Alan using a lot. Non-selective grazing. Non-selective, right? They don't have the luxury anymore. And what happens when you eat something that disagrees with you? You get something. We call it the runs. Okay? I know this is going to be funny, but liquid poop, cow pies. That's a result of non-selective grazing, which is a result of herd behavior, which is a result of pack hunting. And that is what the soil loves. The soil prays for that. And bang, you have a whole new type of productive ecosystem, all because of pack hunting. 20 million years ago, evolution of pack hunting, herding, non-selective eating, and something else, can you guess? Okay, and so the headline in tomorrow's Telegraph, is anyone from the media here? All right, good. The headline, all right, so cow pies. Cow pies are an invention, and they first showed up about 20 million years ago. So tomorrow's headline, Cow Crusader lauds paleo poop. There's your takeaway. All right, so we see this again. And then, so here's the transition. So this was the desert shrubland, not even grass, a desert, a dryland forest area. And then you start to get the bunch grassland, and then you get the mollisols and the sod grassland. Same rainfall. 20 minutes left, okay. So that's a transition of the ecosystem as a result of the herd behavior. Rainfall hasn't changed. So we're talking about, evolutionary time periods, millions of years. But that's what happened. That's the story of the Earth over the last 20 million years. That's the story of grasslands. And what we call sort of the modern grassland, Africa, savanna, that's really like in the last 10 million years or so. And then, of course, the opposite is true. You can create a desert by killing off the animals. And that's what we're doing now. And this picture was taken in 1870. I don't know if people can see it, but this is a mountain of bison skulls. Can people see that? They would pay people, to bring in a skull. People would shoot them from the train. I mean, imagine that. You'd be on a train, and there'd just be, you could just hold your gun out the window and just be shooting bison. Then in the late 1920s, we get the Dust Bowls in the United States. All right, so let me just close up with some more quick science. So this is a 40 million year story of CO2. Now, you can't really measure CO2 over such long time spans, so you have to use proxies, and like the stomata on leaves, they can tell by that what the CO2 was, and boron, paleosol, ancient soils. So these are proxies going back 40 million years. CO2 was as high, by some estimates, as 1,400 parts per million. When the Ice Age started, we were around 262. Where did all that carbon go? Where'd it go? It was there, now it's not there. Oh, it went into the grasslands. Oh, it took ruminants to do it. No kidding. I didn't know that was possible. I thought cows were bad. There was another important evolution, the evolution of C4 grasses. C4 grasses are much more efficient, right? For every photosynthetic, for every, time where the photosynthesis happens, the chain is 4 carbons instead of 3. That's what C3 and C4 mean, right? 4 carbons versus 3. In the chain, in the sugars that's produced by the plants, much more efficient and also much more tolerant of moisture conditions. So it helped the grasses move into the wetter areas. And then, all right, I'll sort of close with this. This is a 500 million year story now of the temperature over the Earth. You can see there's been various climate regimes, of course. We're in this one at the very end. And you can see this profound cooling that's gone on for about 40 million years. There were other periods of cooling as well for different reasons. But we're in that one, right? And why are we there? Why are we in the third great cooling period over literally a 500 million year period of Earth? Come on, someone shout out the answer. Grasslands, there you go. Did I pay you to come here? Okay. The evolution of ruminants and other large herbivores and grasses is what's responsible for that profound carbon drawdown, which resulted in this profound cooling. All right? So when I say that farmers and ranchers are climate heroes, or can be climate heroes, that's literal. That's not just hyperbole. And when we talk about keepers of the thermostat, again, that's not hyperbole either. That's literal. We really do have to be keepers of the thermostat of the Earth. We actually have to keep it in a sort of a narrow range, that it doesn't, it wants to get colder and hotter. It doesn't want to stay in this narrow range. We need to keep it from getting too hot. We also need to keep it from getting too cold, both. So we're going to be managing ruminants on grasslands as a climate thermostat tool forever. For the future of humanity, we will always need to be managing ruminants on grasslands for their climate control capacity. I have many more slides, but I don't have time to get to them all now. But anyway, you get the point. You've been a lovely audience, and I wanted to save some time. We got a solid 15 minutes left, right? Okay, good. So let me end it there. Thank you. So I wanted to leave plenty of time. I mean, there's still another 15 minutes, so we could do a discussion. So people, please raise your hand, and this lovely young man will come around with the mic.
A simple question. Obviously, you're advocating grazing, advocating herbivores. Does Soil for Climate, do you do any technical work in terms of the varieties? You showed us one area where it was just desolate, and on the left it looked beautiful. Is that just because they've started grazing, but are they bringing in new varieties? Are they bringing in different species?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about the technical backup to what you've shown us.
I'm not aware of any planting, if that's what you're talking about. What happens when you do the mob grazing, holistic planned grazing, adaptive multi-paddock grazing, is that the ground cover will just come back, and it will have a high diversity of plants. So I'm not aware of any of those practitioners actually doing seeding. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. No, I'm not aware of that. That doesn't mean someone isn't doing it, but I'm not aware of it. Here's a question. Yeah.
Yeah, two questions. I'll keep it short, but number one was George Monbiot explicitly called this bullshit yesterday. I don't know if you were here. So he was quite technical up to that point, but then decided to descend into hyperbole. Second question is, you dismissed seaweed as a potential solution. The research out of Australia suggests you can get more than 90% reduction in methane from, so I don't understand why you can't have that as part of the solution. It's not really part of the problem.
Okay, so there's two questions. One is about Monbiot, and the other is about seaweed. I was texted yesterday by some fairly high-ranking people. They said, do not start a fight with Monbiot. So I went just to take a picture. But the session I actually wanted to go to anyway was the one called the carbon question, or the soil carbon question. So I had an excuse not to go to Monbiot, so I didn't have to start a fight with him. About this Monbiot, I actually have a slide about Monbiot in here, but I didn't get to it. But basically, yesterday was really a great day because there was a lot of stuff on data and big data, and apps and that type of thing. And my feeling is the Monbiots of the world are just going to be irrelevant. This movement is moving forward, whether he likes it or not. And people will just have apps. They'll be able to see it on your phone. I mean, in real time, you'll be able to get a thermal measure, literally like the temperature of your property from space. Yeah. Oh, right. But that's changing. I mean, believe me, it's changing. And regen networks. Did you see the whole Microsoft bought carbon credits through regen networks in a partnership with a savory method ranch in Australia? Did anyone see that? I mean, it's happening. It's like, well, what do they say? The cows are out of the, So Monbiot's message is just going to become more and more irrelevant. I don't need to fight him because we actually are winning the battle on the ground. And I realize that paradigm is still controlled by big money. Bill Gates wants you not to believe any of this, so you can buy his GMO seeds and the precision agriculture. I have a whole bunch of slides on that. The short answer is I don't feel like I need to debate Monbiot because he's just going to be irrelevant soon enough. About the seaweed, sure, if you can want to give seaweed to cows and it will help, okay. But really, is that there's 100 million cows in the United States. We should be promoting regenerative grazing. If you want to add seaweeds as an additive, okay, whatever. But the fact that that's the message that's coming out of the Department of Agriculture, All right, let's keep going.
Sorry, I'm kind of going back to George a little bit here, but it's a bit more of a specific question. So, a lot of the photos you were showing on the screen there, George would consider kind of marginal, unproductive land that should be taken out of agriculture. We should be replacing the kind of managed, domesticated herds with their wild counterparts and leaving them unmanaged. What would you say is the benefit of having domesticated herds that are managed by people rather than having wild herds of animals?
Right. Okay, so that's an intersection of multiple issues. I got into this from the climate perspective, not from food or nutrition. So you see, from a climate perspective, this is like a carbon accounting issue. We literally have to take the carbon out of the air. Okay, where is it going to go? Just answer that question. Where is it going to go? Well, it needs to go where it originally was. Most of it is in the soil. Now, obviously, the fossil fuels that we've been burning, well, that wasn't in the soil. That was in the deep fossil, reserve or reservoirs. So we need to do even more restoration. So like large parts of Australia, all of the middle of the United States, basically most agricultural land is going to have to be brought back into perennial grassland with grazing. Most of it. Okay? So, all right. So you want to bring back, 70 million bison in the United States and 30 million wolves and just have them, running through the suburbs of Denver? I mean, I don't know. It doesn't seem realistic to me. Now, the irony is that in Africa, the quote-unquote rewilding, that's what Alan is doing. So if you were a zebra or a giraffe or an elephant, would you rather be on Alan's property, or would you rather be on, the Victoria Falls National Park, which has nothing? So you see, Alan Savory, he is rewilding. The same thing with Will Allen in Georgia. I saw bald eagles for the first time in my life. That's the American symbol. I saw them on his property. Well, why? Well, obviously, he's restored the property. Oh, he does pastured. So it's not just cows. He has smaller herbivores, sheep. They got chickens. He's got pastured chickens. Well, you know what? When you get pastured chickens, you're going to get a bird of prey. So where are the eagles? You think they're on his neighbor's property who's just doing monoculture cotton? Or they're on his? So who's rewilding? So these people, they are rewilding. In fact, that's how you're going to rewild. Same thing with Kenya, Tanzania, Sudan, East Africa. You can have corridors of wild animals with predators again, but you need something to sort of jumpstart the process. And this grazing is part of that jumpstart.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm just kind of being devil's advocate. Thank you.
Yeah. Looks like over here.
Ranchers and farmers are the people who have to do the sequestration by managing the herds and by using these practices. You already mentioned carbon sequestration and carbon offsetting and the whole carbon sequestration market that is opening up, in particular in the United States. Are you happy with that, or could that actually be detrimental because big ag and big food companies are getting involved and are using that for financial gains, but not necessarily for the environment?
Right. So, I mean, obviously there's going to be greenwashing. That's unfortunate, but that is a reality. But the other reality is now a rancher or a farmer is getting some money, some extra money for what they're doing. And I think that's great. So I love the fact that Microsoft is doing offsetting through a holistic ranch. I think that's fantastic. It's more money for the holistic rancher. Now, whether or not that's really the best thing for Microsoft to be doing in terms of their carbon footprint, I don't know. And I imagine that a purist would say, well, no, they shouldn't be doing offsetting. They should just be cutting their carbon. Well, they're right. They should. But the reality is that there's going to be this overlap for a while. And during that time, I'm all for it to the extent that the rancher, the farmer, is getting some extra money for their ecological service. Now, look, it happens to be right now that there's sort of $1 on carbon, $20 a ton. Some people say it'll be $40, $100 a ton. But it's not just going to be about carbon. It's going to be water retention. And it's hard to measure carbon. It's easy to measure infiltration rate, right? You just turn the vial over and time it. See how long it takes for, 100 mils to empty out of the colander. So I actually think water is going to be sort of the main, water retention is going to be the main ecological service. It will have a dollar value on it. It won't even be soil carbon. But there will be a dollar value for some sort of ecological service. That just seems inevitable. And the politics of it and who's greenwashing and back scratching, those things will just work themselves out. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wondered if you could expand on how the grasses come back, because it looks very barren, and I could imagine having animals in there, putting some manure, but what do they eat, and how do the grasses come back? Thank you.
Right. So it's typically there's always like something, for them to eat. And as long as you just get that herd behavior. Now, in a situation where there really isn't anything, you can do what's called a mobile corral. You can literally just corral them in that completely barren spot. And a lot of what they've done in Zimbabwe is like that. And so mobile corrals is a key part of this. Now, in other situations, you may have to bring in hay and literally just put the hay down on where the barren spot is and have them eat and poop there, just to jumpstart it. Yeah.
Hi. We haven't really talked a lot about methane, and, we're embarking on this regenerative journey. And I'd like to know what I say to people who point to methane and say, well, it doesn't matter how much carbon you're sequestering, that hasn't been properly measured or whatever, but we know that methane is however many times worse in terms of global warming. What do we say to those people?
Right. So there's a couple issues here. One is that there's new thinking about methane because it's a short-lived gas. So it was called GWP 100, global warming potential over a 100-year time span. That, it turns out that's a completely invalid assessment. And so the new assessment called GWP star by Miles Davis at Oxford looks at the change of animal numbers over a 20-year time span. And if there's no change in animal numbers, then the net loading is zero. Okay, so it's not a net loading. Now, but if the animals go up, then it is. Now, if they go down, it's a reduction. Now, there's other research as well that shows that the carbon concentration increase from doing this right more than offsets the methane loading as well. And so it's still a net negative. And I actually have a slide for that as well. But I just didn't have time to get to it. But, I do have a slide. I'll give you the citation. Do you want the citation? Okay. Hang on. I'm going to give a citation now. It's Stanley, Stanley, 2018. Page Stanley, 2018, in Agricultural Systems. The paper is called Impacts of Soil Carbon Sequestration on Life Cycle Greenhouse Gas Emissions in Midwest U.S. Beef Finishing Systems. I actually have whole slides on all this. And she also accounts for methane. So two issues. One, there's already peer-reviewed research that says when you do the grazing right, the carbon drawdown just on its own more than offsets the methane. But there's also the new GWP star, which says actually we've been overestimating the impact of methane in the first place. The other thing is that when this is grass, you realize it's just a complete cycle. I mean, there's no added carbon molecules added to the system. Unlike the fertilizer, which is on the soybeans, which is made from natural gas. And you've heard about those natural gas methane links coming out of Russia, right? I mean, they're complicit in that. So if you're cutting fertilizer out of your system, your methane load just drops significantly. But see, none of that is taken into the account. Again, we have these reductionist assessments of a whole system, ecosystem, in which the methane is just part of a short-lived natural gas. And again, how much time do we want to spend arguing versus just healing soil? Let's just heal the soil. How are we doing for time? One more question. Okay. Way back there somewhere.
Hello. I've been trying to reduce my stocking levels, thinking I was doing the right thing. Have you got in mind a stocking level that you think is preferable for this?
No. I don't give grazing advice. I'm not a grazier. I'm an advocate for grazing as a soil carbon restoration. There are plenty of people here who can give you specific grazing advice. Okay, and there's lots of good Facebook groups. You know, there's the Regenerative Grazing Facebook group. Do people know about that? Just join that group. Just ask, because, you know, you have a particular situation. I have no idea what's appropriate for you. Yeah. Okay, so is that it? All right, everyone, please check us out on Facebook. We're Soil for Climate, over 30,000 members now. And just continue to do the right thing. Do the good fight. Thank you very much.